Let's talk about 23.5. 23.5, GMMTV's first GL. That's so exciting. We have waited roughly a year and 6 months, so surely the show's going to be worth the wait. Surely the anticipation of over 320,000 viewers on average is well deserved. Surely it is. But it isn't. I have spent so much time practically grieving this show. On the day of writing this, I was actually an episode behind until earlier that day because I was putting off watching it. Oh, but when I finished episode 10, let me tell you I was most certainly not bored. I was angry. I was laughing at my laptop screen in utter disbelief. How on earth did we go from a complete snooze fest to an episode laced with audacity? And somehow, worst of all, it is all amalgamated into this sloppy attempt despite the obvious cracks in the foundation. I'm going to provide a brief disclaimer though, because I know the type of evil that I am. At some point or another, I am going to be using Bad Buddy as a comparison point. I don't want to hear anything about it because, in my eyes, Bad Buddy is a gold star student. A prime example of what GMMTV should try to improve upon for its successors. I'm not saying I want every new show to mirror Bad Buddy in archetype or storyline. I want how this story was told to be recognized as something a writer should desire. The pacing and thought behind every arc, the careful stringing together of plot points, and laying down the groundwork for things early on are all very important when making a show fit strongly within its time constraints. 23.5 is the poster child for wasting time. Okay, I'm now realizing I started this video on a very negative note. I want my content to be true analysis, the good and the bad. And sometimes I feel like I dwell on my grievances because, like with any commentary on YouTube, it's just easier to talk about the things that piss you off. Now I feel like I'm too meta. Let's take a break from that. I think every conflict and plot point in the show had really good potential. Internalized homophobia, insecurity, bullying, asking for help, and so many more issues that people deal with, especially in queer spaces. But those sentiments can get lost and watered down when handled incorrectly. To speedrun, Alpha's dilemma with her responsibilities as the oldest sibling was a huge case of telling and not showing. It made total sense why she felt that way, and I genuinely think showcasing the pressures of family dynamics, especially in Thailand, is super important. But I wish we saw more of it throughout the entire series. We kept being told that she was feeling bad, but we figured that all out within one episode. I wish they had laid the seeds out more clearly from the beginning to make that plotline flow better with the rest. It still made sense shoveled in, but it didn't feel satisfying. I think that if they had actually clocked Aylin as autistic, the bullying bit would have been so much more impactful. I'm not trying to dismiss what we know about Aylin's experience, but we are only showed a very small, surface-level glimpse into the way that she is bullied. I wish we would have seen more of it sprinkled in throughout the show, as opposed to everyone and their mama going around saying Aylin gets bullied. Like, I know, let me see. We only see it when a plotline starts to become centered around her being bullied. I think that would allude more to it being a constant problem, especially when talking about everybody being complicit or not noticing. I guess you can call it a headcanon or whatever, but it just feels like beating around the bush, which comes to me as no surprise given GMMTV's past. Having representation like that, especially in queer media, would be so impactful. But it can do more harm than good if your implication as a writer is that it needs to be hidden, that it needs to be implied but never said out loud. Especially when the people around Aylin try to get her to change instead of inviting her into their space exactly as she is. It is only more proof to me that she is neurodivergent because even when asked over and over to change, she simply cannot. It is not at all something she can help. She didn't all of a sudden choose to become shy or closed off. The way she acts is a result of the way she sees the world and herself. That is a fundamental when regarding who she is. And I don't appreciate Luna saying she likes her for her and falling in love with the Aylin she knows, only to try to get her to become someone more palatable. She never apologizes for that. Like, what the hell? Ongsa's internalized homophobia was portrayed in a very thoughtful way, and it felt like an accurate representation. She brings up fears of not being accepted quite often. This fear is often demonstrated in her behavior when confronted with conflict, but there isn't much done with it. I would have liked to see more of how this affected her socially. I also wish there was more reassurance on Sun's end. For most queer people, that isn't a feeling that just goes away the second one person accepts your queerness. That mindset takes time and reassurance to break down, especially on a deeply internalized level. I had high hopes for 23.5, especially considering the actresses involved. And oh, I don't know, the fact that they begged for the show to get made? I'm not too familiar with Fawn as a director, but I do know she's praised for her work on Together the Movie. I also feel like I should recognize the familiar name of one of 23.5's producers, Piaf. Or Off? I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know. Overall, the behind-the-scenes decision to cut Night North from the show was a smart move and a decision I very much support. GLs can of course have male side couples, but GMMTV's first GL ever? This should focus on sapphic relationships. Oh my god, Cider, you're praising this. Surely this isn't a double-edged sword? Of course it's not. But why does the focus feel so misplaced? Even now. Even after this change. Hear me out. If the writers could not spread their screen time in a way that feels cohesive and satisfying, they needed to cut down on the divisors. The weird shit with Ton and Cheran is so forced and honestly uncomfortable. I'm gonna go ahead and assume it's for comedic effect, but it's a waste of valuable screen time. I think that Mawin and Tin could have been a cute little background couple if they had time to develop behind the scenes, but every time we saw them, their relationship status was exactly how we left it. There was no development in between events or scenes. There simply isn't time to do that, especially with how much time Ton and Mawin's scenes have wasted. 3 main couples for a 12-episode, 45-minute runtime show is already a loaded task. This show bit off way more than it could chew, and the development of its characters really suffers for that. But no, we don't have time for Sun outside of her relationship with Ongsa, but we definitely have plenty of time to let Mawin mansplain bullying to us and watch Ton harass Cheran once an episode. I think Bad Buddy is a great example of fitting everything it needed to into 12 episodes without it feeling rushed. I understand that Bad Buddy takes place over what is probably a longer amount of time, but it encapsulates the entire Odyssey in a way that feels purposeful and well-timed. It feels like a year in the characters' lives. 23.5 feels like a bunch of events, like a storyboarded timeline. I don't feel like I've gone on a journey with them. I don't feel like I've been with them through a year of high school. I feel like I've run into them in the hallway. This issue has left the teachers, Aelin, Luna, and Sun, underdeveloped. Ongsa is pretty fleshed out. We know her motives, her fears, her past, and we know practically as much about her future as she does. Sun, though? Everything is tell not show. That is so boring as an audience member, and being a show with an ensemble cast, it's inexcusable. The show has demonstrated that despite what you may think, it is capable of switching perspectives from time to time, but I've never seen Sun think or talk about something serious that does not concern Ongsa. Her character is so flat, which is an unforgivable mistake for a show in the romance genre. For a viewer to be interested and empathetic to a character, you need to build a relationship between that character and the viewer. They need to be shown compelling evidence as to why they should continue to support them even after they do something wrong. When Sun outs 4 people within the same 30 seconds during dinner with Ongsa's parents and then makes herself the victim by storming out, that looks bad. Really bad. And for the Sun defenders out there, yes, Sun didn't know Ongsa's parents didn't know about them. But then she did. There's a clear point where she realizes what Ongsa is doing and understands that her words hold weight. Then she still chooses to put both Aelin and Ongsa in what could have been a potentially terrible situation. That's fucked. That is selfish and malicious. I get it, Sun's parents are accepting, but rule of thumb, you should never be spilling the beans like that to a gay person's parents, because you just don't know. I would also like to mention just how many times Ongsa has expressed internalized homophobia and a fear of being judged or not accepted for her sexuality. There is a whole scene dedicated to this when they are eating dinner with Sun's parents. Sun did not and should not need someone to spell that out for her. This all looks worse given that we know virtually nothing about her. I cannot sympathize with a piece of blank paper. Perhaps this was a failed attempt to demonstrate Sun's humanity. Although everybody sees her as the charming, charismatic love interest, she too makes mistakes, but something this bad cannot just be something she gets away with. Also, no way is it going to be seen that way when she has been shown as understanding and in touch with how other people feel this whole time. I get it, she felt sick and tired of worrying about other people, but that doesn't mean you get to do a complete 180 and start acting despicable. It is not an all or nothing, girl. Conflicts surrounding outings as a concept are popular because it's so high stakes. It is the potential to change everything, but GMMTV doesn't treat it as such. A lot of shows don't. It creates this whole rift between characters, yet they never actually address why it's so upsetting in the first place. Why is it so wrong? Sun got away with it just like I knew she would. And what? She apologized for loving Ongsa too much? Sun claims she changed herself in ways Ongsa never asked her to, and I'm glad she addressed that. It's not fair to hold resentment towards another person for not sacrificing things you never asked them to sacrifice. But there should have been 2 apologies. It feels like Sun is allowed to be as angry as she wants, but Ongsa is never provided a space to have grievances. This isn't to say that Ongsa isn't responsible for a lot of the conflicts in their relationship, because she definitely is. But if I was Ongsa in episode 10, I would be furious with Sun. Not only for outing me, but for making things about her straight off the bat. Both Ongsa and the viewer need to hear both sides of the story. But this is about Ongsa. She should have already had the opportunity to express how she felt without filtering it through what Sun had already said. She had every right to be angry. She should have been entitled. She should have stood her own ground. Maybe you say that's not in her character. Maybe that's not a strength of hers, but she should have been given the space by Sun. The writers should have given her space even if she chose not to use it, but she should have had the option. I'm growing pretty tired of this routine. When somebody does something to make Sun sad or angry, one of them storms off. Sun or Ongsa. The other has to convince them to come back and listen to them. During this stage of conflict resolution, the other person says or does something that very well should make the other person upset, and nothing is done about it. only the initial conflict is usually ever addressed. Often only what's deemed as the biggest conflict is ever addressed, when you can have sub-conflict within its conflict and resolution. I know I sound insane, but it's true. Speaking of making people upset, the Earth conflict should have lasted the majority of the show. If I had things my way, Sun would have continued to talk to Earth right up until the end. I would have liked to see more of Eunsa pining after Sun while talking to her. I would have liked to see Sun struggle with the idea that she likes them both before finding out that it was just one person, instead of liking Earth and then Eunsa in that order. I haven't read the novel yet because I hear the formatting is awkward, but I plan to at some point, so I very well could end up changing my mind. I do, however, think that if we are sticking with the decision to end this plotline early, episode 5 would have been the best reveal. I understand why they chose to instead have the episode showcase Eunsa's feelings about lying towards Sun, to have her mistakes shoved in her face in a real and tangible way. She deserved that, but allowing her to drag it out simply because she is scared makes the audience lose both empathy and sympathy for her. Now they will have a harder time justifying her actions because she had the perfect chance to come clean, and instead she further carried the lie. In real life, this would probably not fly in most situations and builds a really shaky ground for a budding new relationship. Eunsa deserved real negative consequences for that. I think pushing the confession one episode backward would have made the rest of the story flow so much better, because the confession didn't happen in what I would call later in the story. That leaves so much less time to flesh out their relationship into something real. It feels like we're making up for lost time, and it's not working. 23.5 really lost its way. I know that the mock trailer was just that, a mock trailer, but it felt like there was an actual story to be told. Reading the synopsis for 23.5 practically anywhere goes a little something like this. Eunsa's high school life will never be the same when she carelessly tells her cute and cheerful classmate Sun sweet dreams using the Instagram name Earth. Unfortunately, the masculine name leads Sun to believe she's talking to a guy, but Eunsa doesn't want to lose the opportunity to talk to her, so she chooses to keep it a secret and go on talking to Sun as Earth. That's great and all, but it lasts a total of 6 episodes before it turns into a plain old high school romance. I understand that the conflict was resolved, but ending that plot point completely feels like a bad choice. That is the story. That is the whole synopsis. Now, this show has almost no plot, which isn't always a bad thing if the writing is compelling and the cast is full of 3-dimensional characters. 23.5 didn't have much of either. I watched the second half of the show in 2 times speed, so that leads me to this question. If all I've been doing is whining and bitching about this show, why have I stayed for 11 episodes? And why am I going to tune in for another? Because I'm desperate. Because Milk and Love are the main actresses. Because I really wanted this to be something special. Because Thailand's first Girls Love series, Gap, only came out in November of 2022. At the time of writing this, that was a little over a year ago. In fact, roughly the same amount of time we waited for 23.5 to air. Other countries started GL projects a little sooner, but they aren't far ahead. Sapphic representation is always scarce, even in the West. They either don't want to show us on screen, or they do it in a way that fetishizes and distorts people's view of our relationships. I am a huge advocate for quality in queer representation. And unfortunately, I don't see an end to the fruitless hunt for good sapphic shows anytime soon. All of the actors and actresses involved in not only filming, but the very production of the show have done an amazing job. I think 23.5 is a step in the right direction, and for a lot of GMMTV's casual watchers, it's probably a great fit. But in terms of quality, we certainly are not all the way there yet. I would like to apologize for my hiatus. The time that it takes to write one of these videos can sometimes already feel like a beast within itself, but that daunting feeling is more so in my head. This is actually the easiest part. Then comes recording, which usually takes about an hour, and editing can take me weeks to a month. That is especially difficult when I don't have a lot of free time. And by the time I get through the very first step, the thought of doing all the other steps before the thing I'm talking about becomes irrelevant, it seems impossible. It seems fruitless. So I'm sorry for my hiatus. I would really like to start posting more this year. I want to find more motivation, and hopefully as my skills improve, it becomes easier for me to produce these kinds of videos. I hope the show is still relevant enough. I know that it seems like all I want to do is hate on this show and the template of shows before it, but I really just want to make things better, and I really just want to talk about the show. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and pretty much anything if you look hard enough. Hopefully I'll see you not that long from now. Bye!